joins our group. Let me introduce you to the Reverend Thulie Beresford, who I've invited to come talk to us for several different reasons. The first of which is that she's South African born and was born and raised against the backdrop of the apartheid regime. Family members were victims of the apartheid state, and so she's obviously followed, even after moving to the United States for her studies, has followed the truth and reconciliation process as that's unfolded back home. So she's here to speak from that experience. She's also been a Lutheran minister, presently serving at St. Barnabas Church, just off of Hampton Park, right on Rutledge Avenue, but also serving as our Citadel Lutheran campus minister and as in the ministry team at the chaplaincy at the medical university. And in that capacity, she served on a crisis team. And as part of the team, she was on call the night of the Emmanuel massacre. So she has a direct experience of working with the families of the victims on the night of the massacre. And then more broadly, she's taken a leadership role within her church, but also within the community, as we've all grappled with the reality, the legacy, the challenge of healing and reconciliation post-Emmanuel, as well as post Walter Scott. So for all of those reasons, I thought Thulie would be a great person to come and talk to us. Jeremy Rutledge, who's also on our schedule, got in touch this morning, and he had some childcare issues that came up at the last minute, so he sends his regrets, but we'll bring Jeremy back later in the semester. So with that, welcome Reverend Thulie Beresford.
Hey. So where would you want me to start? I mean, we could be here till maybe after election day. I don't think anybody should complain. But I was born and raised in South Africa. My full name is Thulie. I come after two boys, and so my mother was crying all the time because she thought she'll never have a girl. And so when I was born, then my dad said something, "Now you can shut up." Not really in those words, but he said, "Now you have a girl, you can stop crying." So my name means that I made my mother to stop crying. It means condolence, yes. So we were raised in a very troubled period of time as South Africans of different races. We were supposed to be acting a certain way. Like we had 4 education systems. There was one for the whites, there was one for the Asians, there was one for the coloreds are biracials, and then there was one for the blacks. So the government would invest more on the top, and as it went down, it would be almost nothing. We never had school buses, so we were traveling, we were walking to school maybe 2 miles. There were no school lunches, no meals at school. So if you were without, then you were without. We also had to live in certain areas. Blacks could only live in a black area, whites in a white area, coloreds in that area, and Asians in that area. And so for black people to go out and work in the white areas, they had to have permission. So there was this little book that was called Dompas, which literally means a book for dumb people. So when you were stopped and you were in a white area and they would ask you why you were there, you could show them that you had permission to work in the white areas. My mother was a nurse at the local hospital, And my dad was a school teacher. He was a musician. He was an author, a poet, and he translated parts of the Bible. So I came from a very professional family. But because of the systems in South Africa, they could never make as much as their white counterparts. And so we were born to live in poverty. And but my parents were always justice oriented, especially my dad. They would talk to us about different things that were happening in our country. And as we grew up a little, we could understand. Now, I come from a place where I have so many lenses, you know. I see things through many lenses. When I was a little bit young, my parents wanted to send me to an all-white girls' school because the education system in the white schools was better. And they kind of felt like if I stayed in a black school, I would probably lose interest because I was very smart. I first started school when I was 3, but they told me I could not go into the next grade. So they allowed me to start school when I was 4. So my parents were kind of like, you know, maybe we should give her something different. And I thought, oh, no, I begged my parents. I said, you know, white people don't like us. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to that school, so just leave me in the black schools. So we lived in that one particular community for a while, and then we moved closer to my grandmother, and then also closer to my uncle. And there my dad continued to be a teacher, and he was teaching at a community college there. And my mother had gone back to school to be a midwife. So my mother was going to come back, and then we were going to be happily ever after in that community, because we were living in what was called the teachers' quarters. And something bad very happened. Some 12 girls in the college where my dad was teaching were failed by some of the professors, male professors. So this was an all-black college. There was not a single white teacher there. So these 12 girls were failed by these professors, not because they didn't know the work, but because they had refused to go out with those professors. And so they failed them. And so when my dad found out about that, he went to the rector of the college and said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot just fail kids because they would not go out with the professors. Well, the rector wouldn't do anything about it. My dad wrote to the Department of Education, and about that, the Department of Education didn't do anything about it. So my dad decided that he would have those girls come back, except that those professors who were involved in the case said that they would not teach in any of those classes where those girls were. And so my dad had to go back to evening school to get certified to teach 7 subjects. So he put all those girls in one classroom, and so they wouldn't have to move, change classes, but you know, they would be there. And they finished that year, graduated, and my dad wrote to the Department of Education, and he said, this is my resignation. I cannot work for an unjust system. So he left. But then the problem was, when he left, we also had to evacuate from the teachers' quarters. And the hospital where my mom was going to be coming back to work had not planned for any accommodation for her because they knew we already had a house. And so they said to her, we have a 2-bedroom house, and there are already 2 nurses who are living over there, but they have agreed to share a room and then give your family the other bedroom. Tiny house for 9 people. plus 2 other nurses, 1 bathroom, 1 tiny kitchen. And so my parents at that time decided to send us kids to live with different relatives. So one of my brothers and I went to live in Swaziland with my maternal grandmother. I was 9 by then. So it was very, very difficult, couldn't really understand. So justice had no color. Oh, it had many colors. That, my parents had to move. Our family had to be split because black professors, black education system had put the burden on those 12 girls. So when I look at justice, I look at all the things that, I'm a preacher, I look at God's justice. Love God, love neighbor. And that was not God's justice. So my brother and I moved to Swaziland. Other of my siblings moved to live with other family people. So we were living in that kind of a situation, and so because my dad had to leave his job, then he was unemployed, and then we didn't have welfare system in South Africa. If you didn't have any, you didn't have any. There were times when we had maybe just 1 meal. Maybe that 1 meal was just grits, and if we had sugar, then had sugar. But being a Christian family, my parents always, showed us that in good times and in bad times, to continue to pray. And we had neighbors, we had other people that would just drop by sometimes to give us something to eat. So during that time also, 3 of us went to private boarding schools. And I know it was not easy on my family. My dad would wear shoes until they had holes, until he couldn't wear them anymore. On rainy days, he would put plastic in his shoes because they had holes so that his socks would not be wet. But he never complained. He did what had to be done.